Yo, how you guys doing? My name is Just Richards, and we're back again with the Men Who Cry podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you guys like and subscribe if you like the content coming out my voice. If you don't, watch and go home. Now, I really appreciate for everyone that's watching this. Means a lot, and we're just going to keep going on this week. On today's episode, we're going to hit people up with some NFL thoughts, some NBA thoughts. That's pretty much it. So it's going to be a lot of sports talk. All right, let's go. All right. Okay, so we have just entered Wildcard weekend. At the time I'm recording this on Sunday night. Currently in the middle of Tampa Bay versus Washington. So we will not know the results of the game by the time this podcast ends. But we watched 4 games already. 4 very different games. I'm not going to touch on every single one. Quick notes about the Bills. Denver, congrats to Denver. You had a good season. That's about it. Yeah. Chargers, Texans, I feel like is every single game I've ever watched played between the Chargers and the Texans. Just weird. Like every single time the Texans have the same slot, every single time they make the playoffs, and it's one of the strangest games you watch. There was a point in the game where there was a 3rd and 19 from, I believe they were on the 10 or the 15-yard line. The Texans were in their territory. Not only did they end up scoring a touchdown on this play, they ended halftime with the lead. Okay, I should always say this was 2 minutes left in the half, and they were down 6-0, and somehow ended up leading the game 10-6. They ended up winning the game. Shout out to Jim Harbaugh. Did what I expected him to do. Immediately gets to the team, wins 11 games, gets them into the playoffs. We'll see when they have a couple more draft picks and drafts go on, like how this team kind of builds out and things like that. Moving on to the Packers Eagles game. That game was I don't know if you want to just call it a level of dominance. Like I really think after watching this season, the Eagles have the best defense in the league. I think it's them and the Chiefs. I even think their defense is probably a little bit better than the Chiefs. They're just dominant. Like honestly, they just made the Pack. They didn't make the Packers. The Packers couldn't really move the ball at all, except for one real drive that they had. But I mean, the Packers were not playing well the last couple of weeks. Kind of like the team and the game we're going to really focus on later is they were looking real shaky. And the score is not going to indicate the game was a little bit closer than what the score was, but there was never really a time where I felt like anyone really thought the Packers were going to win this game. But moving on to the game on Saturday night, I feel like the marquee game of the weekend, maybe Vikings, Rams is the marquee game if you like offense, but I feel like the game that I think a lot of people want to talk about or just want to see was Steelers. Ravens, not because I think anyone thought the Steelers were going to win. I mean, they were a 10-point dog, like in the playoffs, and they got rolled. I think it comes down to the conversation overall about what to do with Mike Tomlin. Now, unfortunately, because of the way society is, we can't just have a normal conversation about whether or not a coach should be fired or not without it being some type of like DEI type of deal. But Mike Tomlin's been the coach now for 18 years. Let me look it up exactly how long he's been the coach for. But Mike Tomlin's been the coach of the Steelers. He's never had a losing record with the team. He has been one of the, I would say, model coaches that we've had in the league. And he has been with the Steelers since 2007, so it has been 18 years. Ooh, I had that on the nose. And so, or next season, I guess will be his 19th season. Anyway, he's been with them since I was in high school. Jesus, because I remember when he got that job. Now that I think about it, like I remember when Bill Cowher retired. It was 2 years after the Steelers won the Super Bowl. And then they won the Super Bowl, I think, just like 2 or 3 years later after that. But Either way, this guy has been, I would argue, the second best coach, the third best coach of the era. My apologies. I think he's behind Belichick, and I think he's behind Andy Reid. And he's going to go to the Hall of Fame, no doubt. But I do actually think it's time for them to move on. And I don't think it's because Tomlin's a bad coach. I don't even think it's for the fact of like what's going on. It's just the fact that he has almost been this weird problem of he's able to elevate all the talent around him, but the offenses just look in such a way that it's not elevated enough. And to be fair, because I know a lot of people will say, well, look at the quarterbacks he's had since Ben retired. You know, it's Kenny Pickett, it's Mason Rudolph, it's Russell Wilson / Justin Fields. Like, none of these guys I think are good. However, I think the counter to that is something that someone like Kevin O'Connor is doing in Minnesota, and also what Ben Johnson was doing. Everyone was ripping on Jared Goff, and if we want to really get it to like Sam Darnold / Kirk Cousins / Josh Dobbs, like those guys, Nick Mullins, those guys were still putting up numbers. But let's talk about the main guys. No one thought those guys were good. Like we just didn't think those guys were good. And yet those coaches were still able to get, you would argue, the most out of them. Like those guys made Pro Bowls. Kirk Cousins was making multiple Pro Bowls. Okay. And like we don't think they're that good. And so it's just the idea that I know he's in the tougher conference of the two. In his division, he's got to face Burrow and Burrow and Lamar 4 times. You know, and the Browns defense is good. So like the division is tough. They always make the playoffs. But I do think there has to be almost a shift in thinking that you can defense your way into a Super Bowl win. I think those days are over. If you don't have either one of the elite quarterbacks in the league or a guy who is maybe not like in the top 5, but is at least a top 10 quarterback paired with an offensive coordinator that's able to like elevate him. You know, like those are really all the teams that are like popping now and like have like real chances getting to the second round of the playoffs, getting to the championship game, winning the Super Bowls, getting to the Super Bowls. And I just feel like for the Steelers, as much as he's been as good as advertised, I just don't think that he has been able to find that offensive coordinator for him. And it's odd because look at someone like Sean McDermott for the Bills. He's a defensive coordinator. His background's in defense. And yet he found Josh Allen, and that they've been finding offensive coordinators since. So is it a chicken or egg thing? Yes, but again, you have to understand who your coach is. And unless you're going to tank, just tell the guy, yo, don't play. And trust me, you think Mike Tomlin is really, we're talking about firing him now after coming off being 10-6. You think he's going to survive a 4-13 season? There's a reason why that man hasn't had a losing record. He black. All right. They would have been calling for his head the moment they went for it. So I think that he should be let go. I think that he can do the Belichick and just wait a year. And I think that he would still get a job that could either A, put him in a position where he's paired with a young, really good quarterback, or the team will be so bad that they'll be able to draft a quarterback. So I honestly think that this is more of a separation that just needs to happen for Mike as well, because I also just think that he's a guy that's, I don't think is going to get the credit that he deserves of like maintaining what the Steelers have been. And look, I think that the Steelers are an organization who like not anyone can go there and be a good coach, because like we've never seen them have a bad coach, literally ever. They've had some down years, obviously, but no one's ever said like, oh, their coach is bad. And so I think them moving on from Mike is more of a situation of trying to turn the page on something. And I think for Mike, I think it would reset him in the way. And I really do think, I think it would go the way that it went with the Eagles and Andy. I think that Andy had a 4-13 year. I think the team was fed up with losing in the NFC Championship game. They wanted to blame someone, and eventually they blamed Andy, and they had to fire him. And he left. He went to Kansas City, and they flourished. I don't think there's any reason why Tomlin and the Bears, couldn't be bad, good. Now, I believe Andy took that job like right after. I don't think he took a break. Whereas Belichick took a break and he technically didn't get a job again. But yeah, we'll see. Odd, because I like Mike Tomlin, Mikey T. I think I love when he talks about to the team and how things go, but it kind of is what it is at this point. Hard transition now over to the most toxic debate of something that I don't think should be that toxic at all. We're talking about the MVP in the NFL. So we have Lamar Jackson. We have Josh Allen. Those are guys who are going to finish top 2 in the MVP. Very interesting was Josh Allen was actually the favorite, and a pretty heavy favorite, who's plus 420 from some of the books I was seeing. Sorry, minus 420 in some of the books I was seeing. So basically, if you don't know, for those who don't gamble, you got to put $100 in. If you put $100 on him, you're only banking $4.70 because he's so much of a favorite, and the decimal points goes back. Whereas Lamar Jackson, I believe, was like plus 320 or something like that. But then Lamar Jackson was named first team AP All-Pro. And which that's another conversation about Lamar that we'll have in a bit. But the odds then shifted. Now Lamar is like the heavy favorite. I personally don't think that it's bad for either guy to win. I think there is a strong case for Lamar to win. I think that there is a strong case for Josh Allen to win. I thought there was a strong case for Saquon Barkley to win. But unfortunately, we've just made this a quarterback award now. And for me, I would pick Lamar. That would be the guy I would pick. I think he just had an incredible season. I think that he is one of the most dominant players to ever play in the NFL. And I think his stats back it up. I think he's had one of the best passing seasons. This is probably his best passing season ever. But if Josh Allen wins it, I completely get it. Like, it's kind of just him and some dudes, and a defense, basically. And that's tough because, we couldn't name their wide receivers going into the season, and I still don't think people know who half their wide receivers are. Yet, this guy is, I think, solidifying himself as one of the best players in the sport, and that him winning this MVP, I really don't think is anything to be scoffed at. That's not obviously how it's going to be understood or took, but it is what it is. I think the matchup that they're about to have now is going to be an all-time classic because you're going to now see the two guys who, in an odd way, are compared to each other in the most indirect way possible, and that's through Patrick Mahomes, right? And this really feels like we're living in the Jordan era in the sense that the best guy is kind of just out there and over here, and then everyone else is kind of flocking amongst themselves. Like, we don't really even talk about him amongst his peers in the league anymore, which is such an insane kind of thing to think about. And so, this game is going to be one of the obviously biggest games of their career, and yet the next game is probably going to be the harder game to win. Obviously it makes more sense. You're in the championship game, but you would think that you're playing the guy who one of you is going to feel that the other one stole their MVP. Allen to Lamar, Lamar to Allen, which way or the other. And you might go out there and have your best game of your career, and you still not get to the highest of heights that you needed to do for this year. So It is odd. I need some time to think about who's going to win that game. I think it's going to be a great game. It's might be the game of the. I think this has a chance to be the game of the season. I really do. I think those two guys are the best going right now. Outside of obviously, Mahomes, the GOAT. But yeah, that'll be it. I'm going to put out my Super Bowl pick as well, just so this comes out and it's known. But obviously, I'm perfectly fine to be wrong. I'm just telling you what I'm rooting for, not what I'm predicting. What I'm rooting for. I'm rooting for Lions and I'm rooting for the Ravens because, oh man, do we need some wins? If you know what I'm talking about in this space recently, Kendrick Lamar performing. I just think we need some W's going forward with that. But yeah. All right, switching gears. Last topic. We're going to talk about 4 NBA teams today. Just 4 NBA teams. We're going to start with the positive with 2, and then we're going to do the negative with the last 2. With the first 2, we are talking about the Cavs. Number 1, the Cavs. I think oddly are not getting the respect they deserve. Let me double check. I believe at the time of this recording, they lost. They were losing to the Pacers when I checked this. They did lose. So they're 32-5 now. And they are having the type of season that none of us thought about, but the fact that no one cares or feels as if no one cares. Now, I think the whole idea that no one cares is a little bit of an anomaly. I think football is just so much of a dominant space now, and the fact that we have basically just shitted on the NBA for the last how many seasons and said the regular season doesn't count. And so these people don't care about the stars in that way. But the point of the matter is the Cavs are on pace right now to win about 70 games, which we've only had a handful of teams with 70 games in this league. Obviously, the 73-9 Warriors were the last teams to do so. And so it's the fact that they've just been so dominant. And I think the thing that also gets it kind of annoying and frustrating for them is the fact that, hey, like they're going to have to start recognizing and giving the Cavs the respect that they're due, which is why, as right now, I'm going to do the list. I do think that they deserve 4 All-Stars. I'm not saying this just to blow smoke up their ass. It's twofold. One, I think they at least deserve 3, and I also think that some of the All-Stars in the East have pretty weak cases. And if you just do the numbers, you're just going to end up finding them. So the All-Stars guys I have right now, and this is the starters. I have Mitchell and Brunson in the backcourt. We're going to go with Towns, Tatum, and Giannis. Those are the 5 starters that I think will start the game. I know people think LaMelo's going to start. That team won 8 games, and he's only played like 23 or 24, right? Highlight, shout out to that song from Jello. Have a conversation about that later in the week. But, yeah, that was something. But, yeah, that would be the 5 I have. And then the next 2 I have for the backcourt, I would have Trae Young and Cade Cunningham. Those would be my 2 guards. And then I'm sorry, my bad. I would have, actually, no, it's fine. I could do it that way. I'll have Trae and Cade as my guards. And then the next 3 spots is because I have Jaylen Brown. And then I think you're just going to have to put in 2 Cavs. I think aren't too many other forwards that I think I would pick. So I would pick Jared Allen. I would pick Mobley. And my last 2 spots would go to Darius Garland. That's where I messed up. I had him as initial starter for the wild card. And I would have LaMelo. That would be my last guy. While I don't think he's a starter, I do think there is something to being fun. And I think, honestly, at this point, like, if you're just going to kind of be fun, be fun. It was between him and Zach LaVine, honestly. And, like again, like, you can look at the East. The East don't have that many, like, there wasn't enough. There was more than enough spots. I think a lot of times people talk about the West and be like, man, they ain't that much spots. The East got some extra spots. I feel like they can throw over. So yeah, and I think this team has put itself in the position to really win the championship. I think that the way they play, I really like the way that they use Mobley and Allen now. I'm still worried about them, depending on like matching up and okay, is that stuff that Mobley does going to work in the playoffs 1-on-1? How much that shooting is going to stand up? I think there's questions for them, but at the same time, you can't look at them as anything other than a contender right now. And I think the fact that this is by far the best team they've had outside of the LeBron era or post-LeBron era is good for them, because LeBron had such a hold on that city for such a long time. And now the fact that this kind of now transition now to being whether it's Donovan Mitchell's team or more of like a strength in numbers kind of thing, a couple guys. But yeah, it's definitely the collection of bodies are really good for there. And the second team for positive are Celtics, which is odd because they almost lost to the Pelicans at home. They're a team that's the champs, and I actually don't think that another guy who doesn't get his respect is also Tatum. It's odd because you would feel like, and I think this is such an interesting space because I wasn't alive really. I never saw Jordan play in his prime. I never really even watched him on the Wizards, right? The best player in the league when I started really watching was Shaq. And then you can have a discussion of who was in between, and then it was LeBron. But I always was fascinated between the time in the NBA where it was between Jordan and LeBron. I'm always fascinated by that because people talk about kind of the same thing that's going on right now, right? Ratings are on decline. People aren't watching, yada, 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 all these other things. And I think a lot of it, while I think the ratings conversation is more of a red herring, it doesn't really matter as much. I think the conversation is because we're kind of now in the in-between stage. While LeBron's still in the league and he's still a dominant player, he's just not part of the story, the main storyline as much with his team, right? Because no one thinks his team is going to be able to win the championship or even be in that kind of contention space. And so it's like you're kind of in that in-between again from Jordan to LeBron, and I think from LeBron to Wemby. And it's kind of interesting to see just like how we talk about the stars in between, like those two times. And the reason why I think like it's so interesting now is just because like you have a lot of talented guys in the league, and yet like it's almost hard to convince the public that these are the guys. And I feel like Tatum's kind of in that space right now where he's won a championship. He's going to make now like 6 straight first team all NBAs. He's going to the Hall of Fame. So Hall of Fame lock. And yet, I don't know, but I feel like we talk about him like he's just like not that good. It's like, he's all right. Like how many guys do you know made multiple first team All NBAs, has won a championship, has been to another finals, has been a multiple time All-Star, and we kind of just talk about him like he's like whatever. And so I know why part of it is that way. I think part of it is that way is just because he had a bad finals performance, and that's, I think, part of it. I just don't necessarily know if he has those kind of moments. Those moments where I think about like Giannis, the moment I'll always remember is him blocking DeAndre Ayton, right? Like that's just a moment, And I think basketball, unfortunately, we have almost made it, not dumb it down, but we've made it to a point where like if it's not about like these analytics and these stats, if you're not doing it in this way and this way, everything you do is bad. But people don't remember all that shit, They remember the moments. They remember the moments Kobe gave them. Jordan gave them. LeBron gave them. You remember the block. I have no idea. I know he had a triple-double in the game, but I can't tell you any other stat that happened in that Game 7 in Golden State outside of no one can fucking hit a 3. And I, for whatever reason, whether Tatum doesn't have it, we don't appreciate those moments enough. It's just very interesting to see for me how this season goes for them because they are well on their way to win 60 games. I think they're kind of, their 3-point variance is going to shoot. You're not going to shoot as good every single year. So that variance, I do wonder if that will catch up to them in the playoffs. But yeah, I don't really, know why exactly we don't embrace him the way that we do other stars. Um, Last two teams, and I'll make these ones quick. I think both these teams are cooked in two different ways. All right, we'll start with the Bucks. I've never liked that Dame trade that they made. When they gave up Drew Holiday, it was obviously, it's funny because they actually gave up the wrong guy. If they were actually able to trade Middleton instead of Drew Holiday, maybe this is a completely different conversation with this team. But it's just Jason Tipp. He's a guy on YouTube that I listen to. I want to give him credit for this because this is where I really kind of got the idea. Even though I had these same feelings about the Bucks. Were that last season the Bucks won 49 games, and yet Dame and Giannis both played over 70 games in the Eastern Conference, where several people were hurt. People talk a lot of times about the Celtics capitalizing on how banged up the East was. Well, that coin cuts the other way too with with a team like Milwaukee. And I know they got lost in the first round and stuff like that, but they're still kind of just around the middle of the pack of the East. And it's it's getting kind of late early for them. And I don't think it's a slump. I don't think it's anything like that. I think for them, ultimately, there's just a certain type of teams. There are certain teams that can just very easily beat them. Any teams that have really good guards, and they just can't beat the Celtics. And I think anytime, I think teams like Orlando match up perfectly for them because those guards don't play like that, and I don't think their wings are as dominant as Tatum and Brow are or can be. And so Atlanta beats them a lot, and Trey's just doing whatever the fuck he wants. So I don't know. I'm not saying this is a Giannis trade thing, but their team is kind of just in this weird middle space, and you would think at some point they would have been out to be able to be one of the real contenders. And I at no point since they've made that trade have I ever looked at them once and think, oh, they can win the East. And then the last team, and man, this doesn't feel great shitting on the team. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. The Sixers. The Sixers are still not in the play-in. They're in 11th. And I think a lot of people have been looking at them and seeing how they've played a lot better. But I'm not even trying to be funny. There's a real way that this team doesn't make the playoffs. Playoffs, play in. They do not play an 83rd game this season. And they're 2.5 back of it now, and people want to keep thinking, well, those teams in front of them, some of them will start to pivot. I mean, yeah, the Nets will probably do what they can to tank, but at the same time, it's just going to be hard for them to catch these teams when the other part of this is them winning games. Philly got to win games. It works in concert, right? It's not team A loses, Philly loses, they switch. They have to switch spots because one team has to play better than the other. And I'm just going to read their schedule for just January. Today they lost to the Magic. They have the Thunder at home, the Knicks at home, the Pacers at home, the Bucks at home, the Bucks on the road, the Nuggets on the road, Cavs at home, Bulls at home, Bulls on the road, Lakers at home, Kings at home, Nuggets at home. That's their entire schedule for the month. The worst team they play are the Bulls, who are not ass. So we'll really see where this team's going to be at the end of the month. I mean, I doubt they'll be at 500. I think the best case for them is to be maybe 3 under, 2 under, 4 under. I don't know. For them, I don't see it. And then I'm not even going to go into the start of February, which is also kind of rough for them. But, I think a lot of people think the NBA is such a long season. I know people talk about that a lot, where it's the NBA is you have time, essentially, right? You get 20 of the 30 teams make the playoffs now, right? And if I had to bet on it, I'm going to pick Philly to make the play in just because I would have to think they can pass the Nets at some point. But this whole thing is done. It's done. And where they go from here, I think, is the bigger question of all this. Like, I think they have the two worst contracts, or two of the worst contracts in the NBA on their team. Again, they somehow just turned Tobias Harris back into Tobias Harris. And it's been a struggle for them. Maybe you can try to convince me next season when they retool this again that those guys will be healthy. But the thing is like they're getting older. So, I don't know. I just don't believe in what they're doing at all. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Men Who Cry podcast. I really appreciate this. Again, like and subscribe. Make sure you tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. All right, I'm going to try to be back again this very week that you're about to hear this. And yeah, love you all. Take care. Start of the new year. Let's get to grinding.